Hello, it's Trader Joe. Wait a second. Yeah, that's better. And we are here for another tutorial, well, more of a walkthrough of advanced cannons. Now, you might be wondering what I am actually here to show you, and it is not how to build one of these. I've already shown that to you. But I never actually explained how the shells work. I have a whole bunch of different shells. They each do different things. They're pretty much divided in tiers. Like these are sort of the 400mm ones. This one would be the first one that is, I believe, mostly for 200mm. But these two especially are 400mm. This one is mostly just 400mm. So first shell we're going to show off is this disruptor head. So yeah. Anyway, the way this shell works, and I may as well mention this right now, the base bleeder and the inertial fuse are basically, they share the same block, basically. What I mean by that is that they're both reduced size. And it's probably not going to show for everyone else, but that's 100mm. Oh. Yeah, that's 100mm. The inertial fuse is something like 200mm. And nothing else actually shows as having a length, which makes it difficult to compare the metrics. So one of the things is this is anti-shield. I don't know if this has shields. In fact, I'm pretty certain it doesn't. But just pay attention to the top right corner. It's dealing a little bit of physical damage, but it's extremely minor. Let me try aiming something like the mast. And if it hits, if it hits, this thing has a sensor nest that's very clearly visible. So as you can see, it is dealing EMP damage, and it is knocking those parts off. So that is proof that it works. For some reason, when it hits armor, it's like it's not even really transferring any. I don't know why. Maybe it's a bug. I'm not sure, but I feel like it should have the visual effect. And for crying out loud, I've seen that visual effect on wood, of all things. It's a high explosive shell, basically. So I'm just going to load this up into the cannon and demonstrate it. Let's just fire it there. So basically it's because this is concave, it kind of showcases the effect a little better. It is basically, this is what an explosive shell looks like. Basically it explodes in a radius around it. It'll create a sphere of damage around it. It's not directed though. With this hitting the side of a ship is going to lose some of its damage potential. But if it manages to get inside, then that's when these wreak havoc. However, people oftentimes are going to switch this out in favor of much more precise weapons. So this one, I believe, is a good example and one of my favorites. Basically, it's a HESH round, and it's basically using all of its high explosives for the squash head, which basically it does exactly what it says in the corner. So basically what this does is, it's kind of like think of it like an explosive round version of a fragment map, like of fragments. Okay, demonstration time. I'm going to fire around here. As you can see, it dealt interior damage. It not only hit the surface, but anything inside was also hit, which you could immediately tell. This is what I like about it. The damage to the exterior is maybe, it's a little weird. It's not as noticeable, but you can like see it, like it creates it gives it like scars all along the outside. It's not as like big and grandiose looking as that, but as you can see, it is pretty devastating, and it pierces to deal extra damage. It took out all of this in just one shot. This shell is my favorite because of that. It also shreds through armor pretty well. And that was just 2 shots, while this took like several. Our next shell is this shell. It's a railgun specialty shot. It's basically a sniping AP round. I mean, for crying out, that's exactly what it says. It's countered by shields easily. I'm actually going to spawn in one of my craft to demonstrate this quality. But first I'm going to load it up and fire it at one of those and just like show you the damage it does. So this is a piercing round. As you can see, the damage itself is really minimal. In fact, this is a really bad place to have put it. Warden happens to have a room though. And let's just snipe this. Come on. Oh, there we go. Look at that. This is what a high penetration round does. It went all the way through and ended here, which, interestingly enough, isn't that far from exiting. So you can see how useful this is. Okay, well, you get the point though. It pierces. It'll generally take these kinds of things out completely. Because of the way it deflects though. And it did actually pen this. Oh, that's hilarious. It penned this exactly to exclusive. There we go. Just as a brief example, this is a heavily shielded vessel, level 10 shield, so it's almost always going to catch it. As you can see, it's just deflecting them every single time. If I aim higher, well, the other shield's deflecting it. And it is doing a little piercing damage. Yeah, that time it got through. But as you can see, I cannot target it no matter what I do. It's hitting the shields and then it's deflecting because it's such a high velocity. Yeah, as effective as this is, this would work best in combination with this first shell or even just smaller versions of this one. Now this next one is basically it's a penetration shaped charge shell. So basically, I'm actually not sure how this... Oh yes, when it hits something like shields, or even just regular armor, it's going to release a shaped charge, which is basically going to fire the everything. This is going to fire a shell that has very focused damage, much like the squash head. It has like a main explosion, and then it has like a penetrating element. That one I think is mostly set to penetrate. So I'm just going to say these are like the 200mm shells. So once that reloads, I'm going to take my shots and demonstrate. I'll even demonstrate how it affects shields because it'll basically bypass quite a bit of it. Okay, it's time to take my shot. Let's see. So as a demonstration of this weapon's power, firepower. Okay, that's a little bit too dramatic. You get what I mean though. So let's see, what's the effect here? Not noticeable. Yeah, this is why I don't really like this shell. It would probably shred through stuff with low armor, but it is barely doing anything to this metal. And this is the case where it's too focused and its damage is a little too low. It's like, it's not penetrating. Huh. I mean, it does seem to do a little bit of penetration. But does it take out things like ammo? I don't know. It will ignore shields to a degree. Like that. It'll... So maybe I was a little too quick to say it's weak, but it seems against ships that are large and have spacing inside, it's going to be very weak against. But evidently, just one of these shells is enough to completely detonate turrets. That must be what its specialty is, popping turrets and explosives without actually having to penetrate. So, as it says. So I underestimated this one, actually, by a huge amount. This one, I believe, is an interesting one. It is basically a high penetration shell. Also, I hate how it edits my thing as I'm typing it. Like, but this is basically similar to the other one, except this one is going to pass through and then unleash frag warheads after a certain distance. What is that distance? Evidently it's going to be 1 meter or first surface time of 1 second. I feel like I would adjust this number quite a bit depending on what you expect to fight with this. But I'm just going to put it in as is. Okay. As you can see, it penetrated a meter and then it exploded. Now that one ricocheted. So yeah. Now if I were to set this differently, it probably would penetrate a lot farther. Like, think of it like this. Like, imagine it getting through like 2 layers of armor, or even just 1 layer, and then like accelerated by like a railgun or something to get even more penetration, and set it to like 5 meters of penetration depth, where it then connects with an ammo stockpile, or it manages to clip an ammo stockpile, but the secondary explosion would ensure that it hits it, as well as just dealing internal damage. So now we have this one. This is just a smoke shot. It's nothing special. Oh, remember when I said that there was nothing special about this? I would say this is actually very special, like when you think about it. If you're firing a laser, or you're trying to shoot down missiles, a smoke screen like this, even with a cannon this slow firing, it's going to cause you severe problems. Like, just imagine like your laser craft being peppered with this smoke. Unless you have like the wavefront adjusters, you're going to have severe problems just trying to stop this from minimizing all of the damage you're doing. So it's actually a really good idea for a shell, and it lingers for a very long time. Like just one of those. It's basically a smoke grenade, and instead of deploying smoke on your craft to defend it, you're just directing the smoke at someone else's craft to prevent their damage. So instead of preventing your damage, you are just isolating their damage. I kind of like the idea of that. Oh, and I'm a derp. These can be used in 4-meter long ones, but they're also good for 200 meter. If I change these, this one in particular, like these two, probably would be much more effective if I had used 400 meter. So now we have this shell, which is a hollow point solid warhead body. I'm actually not sure, I have never used a shell like this. But basically, It is for use in railguns, but it will be easily countered by shields. I'll just ignore that. Could work well with larger guns as well, according to this. So it is tearing off armor pretty effortlessly. I can imagine these being fired rapidly for great effect, and this is a 200mm shell doing that. It's really concentrated damage to armor. It's not piercing, but it does cause quite a bit of internal damage. So this basically, it's an alternative to having regular piercing rounds. And eventually, it's going to go all the way through. I feel like a shell like this in miniguns would actually be really devastating. So yeah, let me just assign this one and just demonstrate what a frag warhead is like. These are the kinds that you would see a lot of other people do. In fact, I was using shells like these for quite a bit. So let's just fire one at this. So basically, it's doing alright. It is pretty concentrated, but it has enough spread that once you get through the armor, all that concentrated damage spreads out and becomes like, and it's more distributed. So like an example, there we go. So now we have fragments all over the place, and it's doing mild amounts of damage to the interior here. See, that one took out a block. So you can imagine this being at a high fire rate. Now this one, I believe, it's just a timed flak shell. Yeah, basically, this is going to take out things like missiles very easily, but it's not going to deal much damage at all. It's basically like high explosive, except it's forced to have this explosion in a very wide radius. So just like flak, so basically flak and fragment, don't get those two confused because they do completely different things. Okay, then we'll just say when it hits, when it's supposed to hit, then yeah, there we go. So it's flak. As you can see, damage is pretty much non-existent. It's, however, just to demonstrate, it does have a really long radius. As you can see, it hit all of those balloons. Even though it didn't show, hit all of those balloons, and it set this thing to sink. Which is probably going to, yeah, it's going to it's going to get its balloons back. Yeah, it's not effective for combat purposes, but if I was to make some kind of CIWS system, it would work perfectly. So now we have this one. I'm not sure. It's short ranged anti-shield spam round. Basically, this is something I would put in a minigun. It's 100mm. Basically, disruptor conduits, EMP warheads, and inertial fuses. This is something I would fire at the 4A, but I don't have the 4A. So I'll set this up. Basically, this is just a micro. It's a micro EMP shot, and it's not going to deal any real noticeable damage. In fact, there's almost no noticeable damage at all. But if there are shields, they will start to take damage. Now for like a minigun, this would be extremely effective. I'm going to like explain a few things. Which one is this? This one, I believe, is a good example to use. So let me just 400. See, this is a 3,500mm shell. It fits in a 4-meter shell rack. Now, someone had actually brought this up in a comment, and I'll probably have it up on screen. I could increase the gauge if I wanted to. There we go. So I can increase the gauge to 462 millimeter. This is normally for a 400 gauge, and I can actually round in the decimals a bit more if I wanted to, as this is going to allow me to. So let's see here, 462. This is a 462 millimeter cannon now. I'm just going to, oh no, force this in there, and it is loading. Basically, this is a way to optimize your shells. But yeah, you can increase this to get as much of that shell rack as you need. So just like a quick shot, just gonna take a shot. I didn't pay attention to which one it was. Yeah. This is the squash head one that I like so much. And this makes it a little bit, not even just a little bit, but like extremely effective by comparison. It's like causing way more destruction and chaos. So, yeah. You could say I'm actually kind of like happy with that result. And another way you could do this is by simply increasing the length of a missile. So say it's 400 millimeters, I could add to the length. And I'm just going to add 1 to the length. So yeah, now this is at 3,900. And it has an extra warhead body in it, which could make it even more effective. Or maybe it's not as effective, I'm not sure. I didn't compare these stats, but I can put them up on screen if I wanted. So you can probably see, there's probably a difference there. I'm not actually sure which one is better, but I will in post-editing, and you will as well. So that's what counts. This shell is much closer to the shell rack length because I've added an additional like 300, no, that's like more like a 400 millimeters to the shell. I guess that, so that actually explains a lot. Think of it like this, each shell is like a cube, like shell piece, even though they're cylinders. Just think of them more like a cube. They're as long as they are wide. And so every piece is going to be 400 millimeters, except for when it says it's different. Like maximum length of part is 100 millimeter. This one would be 200 millimeter. So yeah. Okay, basically it's going to be capped to this length. And taking advantage of this, we can actually have an extra bit of shell. Oh geez. Well, that was hitting an ammo stockpile. If I aim it somewhere like here. But yeah, as you can see, it's pretty much as effective. Probably the numbers are a little different, but it's doing pretty similar amounts of damage. And this is just by increasing the length of the shell. Now, whichever way you choose to do it, I guess there are ups and downs to both, but this is a pretty effective looking shell, and I didn't have to change this. Now, I could slightly improve its efficiency if I were to just make a slight adjustment, like 422, no, more like 411. Yeah, if I made it, added 11 millimeters to it, then it would be very close to the exact length, like 99%. So yeah, also, But as you can see, I've caused this to capsize. So yeah, basically, these shells are all different. They completely alter the way the cannon behaves. And they'll change the damage output, although I did literally change gauge quite a bit. Anyway, I hope this helped a little. It's probably not the best explanation, but I hope it was of use. At least I know that this is going to show you various form factors that they can take, and there are other ways to make your shells as well. So, yeah. One last thing. I must thank Dalmadoc for sending me this platform with the shells to demonstrate, so that I can kind of, you know, make this tutorial. Otherwise, I would have just gone off and done like a different kind of tutorial, and without like covering this aspect of advanced cannons, because I'm not really the best with shells. But I'm learning. I mean, a few commenters actually provided so much useful information, such as increasing the size of the shell or the length to accommodate the cannon and to maximize the DPS you can store in your clips. So that is much appreciated. If you have more comments like that, like more advice to give, then I do read those, and I'm actually really happy to see those, that you guys find it worth your time to comment about these things. So thank you. But yeah, anyway, this was Trucker Joe, and hopefully this was useful. See ya.